Hello everyone, my name is Adrielle and today we're talking about how to move to Paris. So a lot of people have seen my TikTok, some of you may have not, but basically I talk a lot about how I moved to France and I promised that I would do a video explaining exactly how I did it. I realized actually in retrospect that it may be way more information than I can fit in just one video, so I'm actually going to be doing multiple videos on it talking about the various steps, so make sure you hit that subscribe button so that you'll be able to get a notification when those videos come up. So, how to move to France. Well, so today the first thing I'm going to talk about in this video is the most essential thing that you need to make a move to France, or Paris if you want to move to Paris, and that's going to be a visa. You are going to need a visa to move. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to outline just a few of the types of visas that I know people have. I'll talk about the type of visa that I have, and then give you some tips on how you can go about getting them and what you need to be thinking about when it comes to applying for a visa to move to France. All right, let's get into it. Okay, so let's start off with the visa that I have. I actually moved to Paris on a visitor visa. A visitor visa basically is a pretty easy visa to get. You just have to show that you have, frankly, enough money to live in France without working. That's the thing about a visitor visa, is that you are actually not allowed to work in France while having that visa. So that's something that's really important. You have to be able to show you have like a decent sum of money, like a lot of money, or you need to show that you have income coming in from someplace or something like that, someplace elsewhere that is like regularly coming to you. The thing about that visa though is that it has to be renewed every single year. So it's a very frustrating visa in terms of having to go about getting a renewal. France actually just recently moved to a system where you could renew it online. So that's kind of the good thing, is that at least now it's a whole lot easier than when you had to go to the prefecture. But yeah, it's still you have to do the renewal process every year. And so that can be kind of a frustrating part of having that visa. The second frustrating part about having that visa can happen when it comes to finding housing. I'll talk about that later in another video about how you find housing, but it can definitely be a bit difficult in terms of getting kind of stable housing in France. And another thing about that visa that you need to know about is it actually does not count towards the length of time you've lived here. And so as a result, it's not a path to citizenship. So if living in France permanently is your goal, by having that visa, you won't actually have a path to citizenship. You'll need to kind of change to a different visa. All right. So that's my visa right now. But the thing is, I've kind of fallen into a great situation where I met a lovely, amazing French man. And so now I'm actually going to be able to switch to a family visa. And the reason why is because it's not necessarily that we're getting married just yet, but hopefully we will. We're actually getting paxed. So paxed is basically, the best way to consider it in the US is, it doesn't quite exist, but I would say the best way to consider it is like government recognition that you're dating, right? So it's almost kind of like a civil union, a civil partnership. And so it's officially recognized by the government. You know, you can file your taxes together, you know, you share everything, expenses. It's essentially like being married, except without like the title. And so if you do that, if you do the PAX paperwork, then essentially what happens is you're considered a partner with this person. And as a result, then you can change to a family visa. The thing is, you have to be PAX for at least 1 year, but then you can change to a family visa after that 1 year. A couple things to note also about the PAX is that essentially it's really easy to break. So that's the difference between like actually getting married. Is a PAX, you just break it by one person signs a sheet of paper and it's done. Like the PAX is over. So that's how you break it. So it's pretty easy. But you can switch to a family visa, and that visa lasts for 5 years. Also, if you marry a French person, you can shift to a family visa, which again is another, it's a long-term visa, so it lasts like 5 years or so. So it can be also a really great kind of visa to have if you happen to meet somebody, fall in love with someone, or already have somebody here in France waiting for you. So that's the family visa, and the family visa allows you to work, so it's a really, really great visa. You basically get like kind of full rights, almost everything you'd have like with citizenship. So it's a great visa to have. Okay, let's talk about the next one. So another visa you can get is a work visa. So of course, right, this means you're working for a French company, and so essentially they sponsor your visa. So with the work visa, that visa can be anywhere from 5 to 10 years. It's kind of a pretty hard visa to get, because basically the employer has to explain like why, like, you can do the job, but like why there's certainly no French person that can do your job. So it can be a bit like complicated for employers. Also, it's quite expensive for an employer to get for someone. With that being said, if you get that visa, obviously you're able to work in France, right? And on top of that, if you have a partner, a spouse, whatever, kids, you can bring them over as well, and they can kind of piggyback off your visa, and they too will have the right to work in France as well, and that sort of thing. So it's a really great visa if you can get it. The one thing is, it is, as I mentioned, a hard visa to get. You either need to, work for a French company, which means you need to speak French, or, maybe you can get a job with an American company, but still, you're probably going to have to speak French. I think kind of like the best way to do it is if you're working for a company in the US and that company has an office in France, to try to apply for a transfer. That's kind of like your best bet to be able to do that. But it's not an impossible visa to get, but it definitely is a little bit harder. So you want to think about that when you're looking for that. You're going to, especially if you don't speak French, you're going to have to really look for jobs that are like only English speaking jobs. And that's generally going to be like, you're an English teacher, right? So yeah. So that is another opportunity that you can have, another visa opportunity you can get. And that's a really great visa to have. All right, let's talk about the next one. This next visa is another visa that can be a bit difficult to get, but if you can get it and you can maintain it, it is another great visa to have. It's called the Profession Liberale visa, and basically it's essentially like a self-employment visa. So you're essentially saying that you work in a liberal arts profession, and so you're starting, a business or in France, and you're going to be like an artist, essentially. So what fits within the definition of artist? Well, a lot of things can fit within that definition, so don't worry, don't think that it's something super complicated. But generally what you have to be able to show, and you have to be able to, kind of explain, is how, whatever business, whatever creative thing that it is you're looking to do, how that benefits France, how it promotes France to the outside world. So, for example, I know an American who is a photographer and does photography packages for American tourists visiting Paris or other tourists visiting Paris. Like, that's what she has. The thing, though, about that visa is that after a year, you have to go and you have to get it renewed. You only get it for 1 year initially. And you have to prove that you made sufficient money with that business in order to stay. If you're able to show that you made sufficient money with that business after a year, then you can get like the 5-year visa. If you can't show that, they will deport you. Like, they will refuse to renew your visa and they will deport you. Or they will say, well, we'll renew the visa for 1 more year to give you a chance to see if you can make money. And if you can't, then you gotta go. So that's the thing about that visa. It can be very hard to get because you have to present a business plan. You have to show that you have potential French clients already waiting for you. It can definitely be kind of a challenge to get. So it's definitely something to keep in mind when it comes to that. But if you can get it and you can show all of those things, it is a very rewarding visa. And you're definitely kind of independent. You're running your own business. And so that can be a really, really cool thing. So let's talk about the next row. Okay, so one of the last visas I want to mention is a student visa. So a student visa basically means kind of what it sounds like, which means you're going to be a student at a school. There are certain requirements as to kind of how many hours you have to be a student, right? So it's not like you could be like at a school and you're only taking like 5 hours, of, class a semester. That's not going to work. You have to be able to show that you're an actual student. And that student visa is generally going to last for like the length of your program. The perk of a student visa is that you do get the right to work a very limited number of hours while you have a student visa. So you are limited to a certain number of hours that you can work when you have that visa. And the downside is it only lasts for the length of kind of like the program that you're in. So you you do have to kind of, once like that visa ends, you have to be able to kind of transition. The good thing about that visa though is they do give you a certain period of time after, you get out of school to find a job. So you can renew that visa. Once you get that visa, you can renew it for basically like a year, and they give you that time to like spend that time job searching and looking for a job so that you can kind of stay in France permanently. If you're not able to find one within like a certain period of time, you gotta go. Basically, plain and simple. But you can, because you can work while you have like the student visa, that does give you time to like make connections and whatnot so that you can kind of begin to line something up for when that visa ends. And the thing is the good thing about a student visa is one of the only visas where you can change your visa status after it expires. So the thing is, with a lot of the visas, if you have a student visa, you can change to a work visa, right? Because the whole point is that if they want to help you find a job in France, and then you can work in France. However, if you have, let's say, a work visa and you want to go do like a student visa, you actually might have to go back to like the United States or frankly another non-EU country and apply for that student visa from there and get that student visa from, the US, and then be able to come back to France and live as a student. So that's the thing about some of these visas that you have to keep in mind, is that a lot of the visas are very hard to kind of change from one thing to another. So for example, for me, I'm on a visitor visa. Because I'm meeting somebody, I can easily change the family visa. That's not going to be difficult. But by being on the visitor visa, if all of a sudden I wanted to change to a work visa, like they might require that I go apply for that work visa in the United States. So they might say, you have to leave France, you got to go sit in the United States and apply for the work visa there. We're not going to do it directly here. And that's kind of one of the things with, you have to think about, like, if you're doing a work visa and you want to go student, and then you probably are going to have to apply for it, like, in the U.S., at the French embassy in the U.S. So that's something to keep in mind, is that it can be very, very complicated for those reasons. There are just a lot of things that you really have to think about in terms of these visas. I would strongly recommend actually that you speak with an attorney. If this is something that you're looking to do, you really want to move to France, I would strongly recommend that you actually speak to an attorney. The website on the French embassy's website on visas and whatnot is very confusing. As someone who did it, I can tell you it's very, very confusing. There are a lot of Facebook groups, like expat Facebook groups involving, Americans living in Paris and whatnot. The thing is, some of those groups are good. Some of those groups are not so good. And again, everything is very specific to each person's circumstances, right? So it's really hard for one person to be able to say, oh yeah, I did this, and then that's how I got, my visa. Another person could have done the exact same thing and they would not have gotten a visa. So it really, really just depends. One question that I'm sure you want to know in terms of visas is that, does France have a visa that allows you to work for a job in the US while you live in France? Technically, no. Okay, so a lot of EU countries have this. France does not. Technically, in France, if you have a job in the US, there is no visa that allows you to work in France and have your job in the US. Technically, no. There are people who do it on visitor visas. And there are people who have work visas, professional Liberale visas, and most of their clients are actually in the US, and they basically don't have any French clients, and they do it that way. And then there are people who came here, their spouse or significant other, got a job here in France, and then they came and they're working for their company in the US, but since they're part on the spousal visa, it's okay. It's the whole thing is actually quite complicated. There is no clear guidance from the French government. There's no clear guidance from the French embassy. And frankly, even most of the attorneys, they say, technically, no, you are not supposed to work in France if you have a visitor visa, but it's not really that big of a deal if it's your own company or whatnot. The whole thing, I don't know. it's complicated. I would strongly suggest talking to an actual attorney, because the thing is, there are going to be tax implications. With that said, I hope that you all have enjoyed this video. I really am so excited to be able to share this information with you. Please feel free, if you have any questions, to leave them in the comments. I will do my best to help answer them. And as I said, what we will do is in our next video, we'll talk about kind of the next steps. So once you get the visa, what's step 2? Well, you gotta get housing, you gotta get a bank account, you gotta get all those other things, and those are all integral to your move to France. And so what we will do is I will discuss those in more detail in some later videos. Thank you so much for taking the time. Feel free to let me know your thoughts in the comments, any questions, and I hope to see you again here soon.